Oh, okay. 1 o'clock Friday, last day of the winter term. Hopefully, we're hanging in there for a couple more days. Or no, not a couple more days, one more day. So we're going to wrap up with our Latin studies today in lesson 3, just working through these accidents of the parts of speech nice and slowly, taking our time. So we're going to continue today and wrap up for the term. So let's get started. Sorry, I've got my own kids coming home from college, and I just saw one of them wandering across the front lawn. Looks like he's pretty worn out. So we're just getting ready for break here, and gardens are starting and allergies are starting. So it's just a big, big mess. So anyway, let's get finished and get ready for the break. So where we're at here, let's look at my screen. Let's see, share my screen. I think I can do this. Oh, it's not being friendly to me. Everybody's in here. Share my screen. Can you guys see the Latin textbook here? You see that on your screen? Give me a nod if yes. No, nobody sees anything. It's not letting me share my screen right now. There we go. Here it comes. Here it comes. There it is. Okay, so now we've got our Latin text. Now, I've told you we're going through this old Latin book. We talked about this last week. This is a book. This is a newer copy of the book, but the original book was published in the 1500s. It was the official text that was recommended by the Jesuits for Latin students in their schools way back in the 1500s. And I like to go through the textbook like this because it kind of proves that I'm being honest as a teacher. I make myself accountable to the text and say, hey, look, you can look at it for yourself and see whether I'm making my own rules up or whether we're actually studying what's in the book here. So we're currently in lesson 3, which is De Accidentibus Partium Orationis, which means on the accidents of the parts of speech. So we've been talking about the accidents of the parts of speech. In the first talk on this lesson, we talked about the 10 different accidents, and we've been working through them little by little. We then studied the numeri nominum, the numbers of nouns. Then we looked at casus nominum, the cases of nouns. Then we looked at genera, the genders of nouns. In section 4, we looked at declinationes, the declensions of nouns. And then last week, we looked at pronomina and participia, which is the declensions of pronouns and participles. So all of that stuff has already been covered, and it's all available in recorded videos. Okay, so if you haven't been able to join us for those classes, all of that stuff's available. I think it's all on the Latin grammar course page on the study center. And we're finished through section 4 here. You can see Roman numeral 4. That was on declensions. And now we're moving on to section 5, which really gets us into the good stuff, which is the conjugations of verbs. So if you've been in Latin reading up to this point, you've been learning verbs, how to translate verbs by just memorizing the information that you're given. So if there's a verb and, I'll tell you, this means you did say, or this means he has sent. I've just been telling you the translation. So you've been memorizing it, which is not real learning because you don't understand what's going on. It's like being a toddler learning the language by imitation. When we get to section 5 here, even though we're not studying the forms yet, we're going to go into all of this stuff in detail in future lessons. Even though we're not studying the detail yet, just this one simple little bit of this lesson will make a lot of sense out of a lot of things for you. So we're going to go through section 5 here today. I think we can easily cover all of it in one class meeting. So by the end of this class, hopefully you have a good understanding of why Latin verbs look the way that they do. And I'll give you some tools that can help you to get started with this, even though we haven't studied it yet. I'll give you a tool that helps you out here. Let me just get it real quick. If I have to just Google. If you just Google Latin conjugation sheet or whatever, Latin conjugation sheet. The results will come up, and I'll be here. I'm right up at I'm the top at this search here. So Latin conjugation chart, you'll see Classical Liberal Arts Academy. If you open this up, you'll see this chart comes up. And what can I do here to make this easier? I'll just zoom in on it when I need to. I'll download it real quick. 1 second. I'm talking to myself. Just bear with me. Okay, we can look at this later on. So we'll check this out later, and by the end of this class, this crazy chart here will make sense to you. So just hang with me during this class. I'll go through the rules with you, and then we'll take a look at this crazy chart. And like I said, you can get this chart by just Googling Latin verb conjugation chart or whatever, something like that. And no matter what you end up typing in, it'll lead you to this chart because it's pretty popular. All right, so we'll check that out later. So now what we're going to do is go through this rule here. So follow me along as we go through this rule. We're going to learn about the 4 Latin verb conjugations. The 4 Latin verb conjugations. Let me just zoom out a little bit. So when we look at all the verbs that we run into in Latin, we're going to see lots of different forms. Just think about, the opening verses of John. I've got John lesson 2 up here on my screen. We see fuit homo missus ad Deo. We see fuit, that's a verb. Erat, that's a verb. Venit, that's a verb. Perhiberet is a verb. Crederent is a verb. We see erat again. Perhiberet again. Erat again. Illuminat, that's a verb. Veni, well, that's a participle. I'll leave that off. We see erat again. We see factus est, which is actually a verb form. I'll talk about that in the future. And then cognovit, that's another verb. So obviously we see lots of verbs. We can't have a sentence without a verb. And our ability to understand how to translate a Latin verb, really everything depends on that. Our ability to read Latin totally depends on our ability to understand verbs. So you're sort of an ignorant child, or like a blind man studying Latin when you don't understand the verbs. And once you learn the verbs, once you understand what the forms of the verbs mean and how to translate the verb, now all of a sudden the whole language becomes available, okay, becomes accessible to you. So understanding the conjugation of verbs and how to translate verbs is obviously one of the most important parts of the study of Latin. And really, if you look at what causes students the most trouble in translation, there are 2 things. There are 2 things that cause the most trouble. Number 1 is they just don't have enough vocabulary. That's the number 1 problem. So you have to constantly be building your vocabulary. And obviously, there's 2 ways to do that. You can just read and translate and read and read and read and just constantly build your vocabulary by reading and translation work. That's sort of a slow way to do it. Even though it's the best way to do it, it's a slow way. The other way is to use our Latin vocabulary course, which just takes you through all of these different lessons and topics, and you learn batches of Latin vocabulary words with each lesson. So building your vocabulary, that's obviously the first challenge. If you just don't know the words, I mean, there's nothing you can do, right? If you walk out into a place and you've never been there before and there's all new stuff and you don't know the names of any of it, it's impossible to talk about it. You have to talk like a toddler and just point at stuff and say, what's that? What's that? What's that? So vocabulary is the first challenge with reading. And then secondly, it's just verbs. So the second most important thing is verbs. If you can't understand the verbs, you really can't read the sentences. So vocabulary and verbs. And I think what we cover in this lesson is going to, even though, again, we're not studying the forms yet in detail, we're going to study all of this stuff in detail. So don't get nervous or anything like that. We're just getting started here. But I think by the end of this lesson, no matter what level you're at, you'll have a really clear understanding of how the verbs work. And then I'll show you how to use that chart, and that chart will help you to translate just about anything you find. All right, so let's go through this together. So we're just going to go right from the Latin here because it's the most simple way to do it. So you see, conjugationes verborum sunt quatuor. And that means the conjugations of verbs are 4 in number, all right? There are 4 conjugations of verbs. So real quick quiz on chat. How many declensions of nouns were there? How many declensions of nouns were there? Think. Yeah, good. 5. Very good. All right, great. So there are 5 declensions of nouns. If you were to explain what a declension is, what is a declension in one word, what would you put? In one word, what is a declension? What is a noun declension? Give me one word. A form, decline, a family, that's good. Abigail. I think Abigail's turned into our Latin superstar here. A family, that's the best way to put it, I think. It's a family of nouns that share the same types of endings, okay? So that's what a declension is. And we said that there are 5 declensions of nouns, okay? So 5 noun families in Latin. Well, what we learn here in this 5th part of the lesson is that there are 4 conjugations of verbs. So it's the same idea. A conjugation is simply a family of verbs, okay? So there are 5 noun families. There are 4 verb families, four regular verb families, because we're going to also see that there are irregular verbs, which need to be studied separately. But there are 4 regular verb families, 4 conjugations of verbs, okay? And if we look through the rule here, we see they're named just like the noun declensions. They don't have any fancy names. They're just named. Prima, what does prima mean? Give me a text. What does prima mean? First, very good. So we have prima, that's the first. Then we've got the secunda, conjugatio secunda, which is second, very good. Then we've got tertia down here, which is third. And lastly, quarta. So you see this rule here. Yep, fourth, very good. So this rule 5, you see, is very, very simple, very simple. The conjugations of verbs are 4, and then it just gives you prima, secunda, tertia, and quarta. So a very simple rule, okay? There are 4 verb conjugations, and then it just explains very simply those 4 conjugations, okay? So what's the first conjugation? The first conjugation, conjugatio prima, is that cuius, whose, or of which, the secunda persona singularis presentis indicativi. Now that looks like a big complicated phrase, but let's just translate it one word at a time. We already know what secunda means, right? We just talked about that with second declension. But here we have secunda persona. What does secunda persona mean? What does secunda persona mean? Yeah, it's very simple. Okay, so this isn't any kind of brain surgery here. Secunda persona, very good. So the first conjugation, whose second person singularis, what does that mean? What does singularis mean? Should be very simple. Singular number, right? The second person, and this is genitive, so it's of the singular number. What does presentis mean? Presentis. We have of the singular number, presentis, of the present tense. All right, so it's genitive again, so it's of presentis, of the present tense. And then we have indicativi. What does indicativi mean? Of the indicative what? Of the indicative, what is indicative referred to? Of the indicative, not form, nope. Of the indicative mood, very good, okay? So that big messy phrase there, it just means the first conjugation, all right? And here's what we're doing here. Listen carefully to this real quick. I just want to make sure this is clear. When we talked about the nouns, we said that the noun declensions are identified by certain forms, right? We said you look at certain forms to identify the noun declensions. What form did we look at to identify noun declensions? Real quick. What form did we look at to identify noun declensions? Genitive. What genitive? There's 2 genitive forms for each noun. Which genitive did we look at? We looked at the genitive case singular. Very good, Abigail. Okay, so genitive singular. So when we're talking about nouns, how we identify the declension or the family is by looking at the genitive singular, okay? Well, in verbs, obviously there's no genitive singular because verbs don't have cases. So the first question we have to ask is, what do we look at to find out what conjugation a verb belongs to? How do we identify the verb family? So that's the first question, and this is the answer to that. We look at the second person of the singular present indicative. We look at the second person of the singular present indicative. And of course, that's not very helpful because none of you know what that is, right? So it's like thanks, but no thanks. It's not helpful, all right? So we're told how the conjugation is identified. It's identified by the second person of the singular present indicative form, and it ends in as. So here you've got the ending as. So if the second person singular present indicative form ends in as, and if the presens infinity, the present infinitive form, ends in are, A-R-E, then it's first conjugation. So the second person singular present indicative form ends in as, and the present infinitive form ends in are. That's first conjugation. And that's great information, but no one studying Latin has that information. So it's pretty useless. So let me show you where you can get that information. Give me 1 second. In our lesson here, let's see, did I get, yeah. Okay, so there we, in our lesson on nouns, I showed you how you can get all the information you need from a dictionary, right? So we had the same problem with nouns. We can say that you can learn the family that a noun belongs to by looking at its genitive singular form, but nobody knows what that is. So that's really not helpful. So I said, well, the dictionary shows you that information. You can look in a dictionary and it will tell you the nominative form and the genitive singular form and the gender. So it'll tell you everything you need to know what declension the noun belongs to in the dictionary. Well, the same thing is true of verbs. So if we look at a dictionary entry for a verb, and I've got one in the lesson here, we have a dictionary entry. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit here without this going berserko on me. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I got to go back and find this. 1 minute. Let me get back there. I zoomed in and it made it go bonkers. Let me just go find it. There's the noun example. Choop, 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 choop. There's the verb example. All right. If you look up a verb in a dictionary, in a regular Latin dictionary, it will give you all of this gobbledygook information at the beginning of the entry for the word. So you can see all of this, and like I said, it looks like it's just like some kind of, somebody sneezed a bunch of letters on the page there, but that's all important information that tells us everything we need to know about this verb. And so we've got this first verb that I used as an example, which is doceo, and you can see the definition means to teach, doceo. All right, so we have doceo. This ending here is the first person singular present indicative form. And again, don't get distracted or confused by all of this stuff. It's going to be real simple in the end. Just follow me along. So we're given the present form, the first person singular present form here, doceo. Then here, we're given this second ending. This is the first person singular perfect verb ending. So doceo is present, docui is perfect or past tense. Then we're given this third form, ctus, that's the participle form. So doceo, docui, doctus, that's going to be the past participle form. And then we're given this fourth form, ere, E-R-E, this is the present infinitive form. So the present infinitive form is docere, docere. So all that you need to understand here is all of the information you need to identify the conjugation of a verb is given to you in a Latin dictionary. It's all there, given to you. You need to know what that information means, but it's all given to you, and it's explained in the lesson. Let me show you one more place. If we go to Latin words, the Whitaker's Words Dictionary, we'll look up the same verb, and you see down here, it'll give you the forms written out. Let me zoom in a little bit. So you see the forms doceo, that's our first person singular present form. Then we have the infinitive docere. Then we have the perfect form docui. Then we have the perfect participle form doctus. So it gives you these 4 forms. This isn't just random information that somebody decided to throw up on the screen. These are the 4 forms of this verb that you need to know to figure out all of the different forms of the verb. So if you know those 4 forms and you study grammar, you can figure out every single possible form of the verb in all tenses, in all moods, in all persons. Everything you need to know is right there, okay? So doceo, docere, docui, doctus. Now, let me ask you a quick question. This rule we just read, it says that the present infinitive ends in what? The rule we just read in the lesson, it says for the first conjugation, the present ending is what? Very good. ARE. That's the right answer. So is docere a first conjugation verb? Yes or no? Is docere a first conjugation verb? Yes or no? No, very good. Okay, so we don't have a good example here. We're told in the rule, and I'm sorry if I flip back and forth a lot, but there's a lot of information packed into this lesson. We're told that the second person singular form is AS, and we're told that the present infinitive form is ARE for the first conjugation, and then we're given an example, amo, amare. So let's go back to Whitaker's Words, and we'll search for amo. So if we look at the forms of amo here, the verb I love, amo, we have amo, and then we see the infinitive form is amare, given to us by the dictionary. You're not supposed to know that. That's not knowledge you're born with, so don't feel like you've got some kind of learning disability because this isn't obvious to you. You're not supposed to learn, you're not supposed to know that. Dictionary is telling us this. So if I look up the verb amo, it tells me the infinitive form is amare. And then it tells me the perfect form is amavi, and it tells me the participle is amatus. So it gives me the 4 forms that I need to know all of the forms of this verb. And I see that the infinitive form ends in are. So this is a first conjugation verb, okay? This is a first conjugation verb. There is an English word in the book. The word is are. I'm not sure what you're talking about there, Jude. But anyway, amo, amare is an example of a first conjugation verb. So that's the example given to us in the book. And if you look it up in a dictionary, you'll find that the infinitive form is are. So that's the first conjugation. And we're going to look at this more in a few minutes on that chart, which is going to really sort of open all of this up for you. And you can all download and keep a copy of that chart and just look at it all the time or print it out, whatever. So the first conjugation, if we want to identify verbs of the first conjugation, we look at the second person singular form of the present indicative, and we'll see that it ends in AS. Or we can look at the present infinitive form and see that it ends in ARE. Okay, ARE, are. Yeah, maybe you see ARE and are thinking of the English word are, like the verb, but notice it's in italics, so it's actually Latin. That's why when I retype these lessons, I don't like how it's like that. I think it's too hard to see sometimes. When I retype them, I usually turn those into capital letters just to make it clear. So if the present infinitive ending is ARE, like amare here, it's first conjugation, all right? First conjugation, The vowel in the endings is A. The second conjugation, so let's go on to the next one. The second conjugation, whose second person present indicative, ends, that's what exit means, ends in ES. So the second conjugation, the second person singular present indicative form ends in ES. The first conjugation ended in AS, the second in ES. And the infinitive is ERE. The infinitive is ERE. Now, this is going to get complicated because if we look at the third conjugation, we're going to see that the infinitive also ends in ERE. So the second conjugation and the third conjugation both end in the infinitive form. They both end in ERE. So that's totally not helpful, right? That's not going to help us if they're the same, but they're not the same, because what this rule tells us is the infinitive of the second conjugation ends in ERE, and then it has this phrase, penultima producta. Penultima producta, and none of you know what that means, so I'm going to explain it, so don't get nervous. Penultima means in English penultimate, and that's totally not helpful. But it's an English word, penultimate. It means second to last. Penultimate means second to last. The reason why it means second to last is in Latin, there's a word pene, which means almost, and then ultima means last. So penultima is shortened for pene ultima, almost last, second to last. And producta, you may think, oh, that looks like the word product, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the English word product, so don't think that. Producta means led forth, and what that means is long. It's a long syllable, okay? So the infinitive in the second conjugation ends in ERE, and that E that's in the penultimate syllable, the second to last syllable, that first letter of that ending is a long E, okay? It's a long E. In the third conjugation, we're going to learn that it's a short E, okay? And again, in terms of like global war and nuclear holocaust, this is not very important, but in terms of translating Latin, this is how you tell the difference between second and third conjugation verbs. The second conjugation has a long E, R-E in the infinitive. The third conjugation, as we're going to see in a minute, has a short E, R-E. So let's look at an example here. If we go back to Whitaker's words and I look up doceo again, doceo is an example of a second conjugation verb. We see the infinitive ending is ERE, okay? We can see the infinitive ending is ERE, but how do we know it's long? How can we tell that E, that first E, how can we tell it's long? There's no symbol over it. Obviously, when the Latin people wrote, the Romans, they didn't write long signs over their letters and stuff like that. They didn't put all that information in writing. People knew it was long because of how it sounds. So there's two ways to understand how it sounds. First of all, if you look back at the first person form, you'll notice that it's got an E in the ending. So it's got EO in the ending. That's your first sign that it's second conjugation. We'll see in the third conjugation, there's no E in the other forms. But it's also known by pronunciation, because when that vowel is long, we accent it. So when we pronounce this word, if you say docere, that's wrong, because you accent the O. And there's no way that the O can be accented because of rules of pronunciation. The right pronunciation of this is docere or docere. The accent is on that E in the infinitive ending because it's long. So because it's long, it's accented in that word. So we say docere, or in classical Latin, docere. So that E is accented. So all of the Roman Latin speakers would know it's a second conjugation verb because of how it's said. So they wouldn't need a long sign. They would know by how it sounds. Docere, it's second conjugation. The first person singular is dokeio, and the accent is on that e because it's long. Dokeio, dokeio, right? Sorry, my phone's going bonkers here. Okay, so we see dokeo, dokere. When we have a second conjugation verb, there are e's in both the present form and in the infinitive form. That's how you're going to know it's second conjugation, okay? And we'll look at a third conjugation word in a minute, and you'll see that this e in a third conjugation, this e disappears, all right? So let's go look at that. So we're going to go on to the third. You see the example verb is dokeo, dokes, dokere, okay? Now the third conjugation, whose second person present indicative ends in is, okay? It ends in is. So notice the third conjugation, even though the infinitive ends in ere, there's no e in the present tense forms. And the reason why there's no e is because it's short and it drops out because it's short. So we're told that the present indicative, the second person ends in is, and it's breve. That means short. So short is. And the infinitive ends in ere, penultima correpta. That means the second to last syllable is short, correpta. So the difference between the second and the third conjugation, they both end in ere in the infinitive form, but the second conjugation is long and the third conjugation is short. In the second conjugation, the e stays in the present tense forms. In the third conjugation, the e drops out of the present tense forms. So that's how we're going to notice the difference. We're given an example here, lego, legis, legere. So lego is the first person singular present tense form. So lego means what? What does lego mean? The verb means to read. That's what the infinitive means, Cecilia. The infinitive is to read. What does lego mean? Lego is first person singular present. First person, very good. I read. Okay, so lego means I read. That's good. It has nothing to do with Lego blocks. I don't think that they were named Lego to mean I read. I don't know why they're called Lego. You guys probably know something like that. The second person singular, so think with me here. Keep your brains going. The second person singular is legis. Legis. What does that mean? The second person singular is legis. What does that mean? Think. We already know what the verb means. Now, Jude, you wrote to read. You tried to write to read there. You spelled it wrong, but that's okay. To read is the infinitive form. So it's not to read, okay? We're talking about legis. Legis. It's you read. That's right. That's the right answer. You read. It's second person singular. Legis. You read. And notice that there's no e in that form because it's third conjugation, okay? When we looked at dokeo, we saw that the ending was es. There was an e in the ending because its second conjugation has a long e. The third conjugation has a short e, and therefore that disappears in the present tense form. It's not legeo, it's lego. It's not leges, it's legis. All right, so that's third conjugation. Legere. Notice also the pronunciation. When I showed you docere, I said we accent the second to last syllable. We accent that first e. We say docere, docere, because it's long. In the third conjugation, we don't do that. It's not legere. That's not how it's pronounced, because that e, that second e here, the second to last e, is short. So instead of legere, it's legere, legere. So it affects pronunciation. So again, for a Roman person who is speaking Latin, they wouldn't need long signs and because they would know what it sounds like. We usually need long signs because we have no idea what it sounds like. But docere is pronounced with an accent on the second to last syllable because it's second conjugation, and that E is long. And then leggere has the accent on the third to last syllable because that E is short. So it's marked by pronunciation. So let's look up Lego here on Whitaker's Words, and we'll see this. So for Lego, we have Lego. We see the meaning is to read. Lego. And then the infinitive is leggere. And then we have the perfect form is leggi. So let's see who's really sharp here. Maybe you picked this up through Latin reading. Maybe you've had some Latin classes before. Leggi, just listen carefully and think. Leggi is the first person singular. So think what does that mean? First person singular, perfect tense. So how would you translate the first person singular, perfect tense? What does that mean? Who can figure that out? See if there's any sharp cookies here. Very good, Abigail. I have read. That's perfect. I have read is perfect. Now, Gianna, you wrote we can read it in two different ways. We could say I read, or we can say I read, so it's not really clear, but you see, if we put that helping verb have in there, it makes it clear. Okay, so I have read. That's okay. I'm just telling you that's the word read is just weird because the past tense in English, they look the same, but they're pronounced differently because English is just bonkers, right? English is a crazy language. So we look at the same word and it's, the word, I mean, just think how funny it is. In English, the word read can't even be pronounced simply. It's pronounced in two different ways, read and read, even though the spelling stays the same. All right. Yeah, they're both right. So that's right. Yeah, I saw Abigail, you wrote have read and read. So that's good. Okay, so that's the perfect. And then lectus. Lectus, again, let's see who's thinking here. Lectus is the perfect passive participle. The perfect passive participle. Think of a word like it is factus from Latin reading. Factus, lectus. How would we pronounce lectus? It's a participle, it's perfect tense, and it's passive. How would anybody want to take a shot at that or no? You can just say no. We surrender. Did read? Nope. Have been reading? Nope. I surrender. Good. Okay, I'll tell you. Had read. Had read. Had read is close, but it's active. So let me just tell you. Lectus here, I'll write it so you can see it, means lectus means has been read. It's a participle, remember, so it's used like an adjective. It's perfect tense, so we have has read, but it's passive, so has been read. So you've got to get all of that verbal information in there and get it into the translation. And all of that idea, that complicated idea, is found in one word in Latin, lectus. Okay, so if there was a liber lectus, right? Liber means book. If there was a liber lectus, it means a book that has been read. Lectus would be used like an adjective, but it's a participle. It means the book has been read. Liber lectus. Okay. So all of that information is given to us in this dictionary here. Lego, leggere, leggi, lectus. That's what all that stuff means. Then you're given the meaning of the verb itself. And you've just got to learn to recognize what's being given to you, what information you need, and then you can slowly, like we just did here, and it takes some time, slowly you can work out the translation by thinking of all of the information that's packed into that Latin word. That's how Latin works. It's really cool as far as language goes, because all of that grammatical information is packed into the form of the word. Whereas in English, we're much lazier. We just basically say, look, I don't want to deal with all this grammar stuff. Just tell me what it means. Give me a big phrase, give me 12 words that translates this idea. Latin is just more of a lazy man's language. So that's how we translate lectus. Okay, so that's a third conjugation verb. Then lastly, to finish this up, quarta, the fourth conjugation, whose second person present indicative form ends in is. Now, there's a problem there because we just learned that the third conjugation ends in is. We saw the third conjugation, lego, the second person singular ends in is. And now we're told here that the fourth conjugation, the second person ends in is. What's the difference? What's the difference between these two conjugations? See if anybody can figure it out. What's the difference between these two? They both end in is. How would we tell the difference? Can anybody figure that out? No, I said Latin. Latin is not a lazy man's language because you have to think of all the meaning in every word. Imagine speaking in Latin, even if you were an ordinary Roman person speaking in Latin, let's say at the store, talking to the baker, you'd have to interpret the meaning of an individual word that's got all the grammatical information packed into it. You'd have to be thinking, right? English requires much less thinking. So what's the difference between these two conjugations? It says they both end in the second person singular present in is. So how in the world would we tell them apart if they both have similar ending? Can anybody look at the rule there in the original Latin and figure out what the difference is? If you look at it, it tells you. I know it's difficult to read, but that's one of the requirements of studying classical studies is you got to read impossible books with terrible print. What's the difference between the two? Very good, Abigail. Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. Samuel, you said the difference is the infinitives, but I'm asking just about the second person singular form. It tells us they're both is. The second conjugation ends in is, and the third, I'm sorry, let me say that again. The third conjugation ends in is, and we're told that the fourth conjugation ends in is. So what in the world's going on here? Abigail got it right. If you look at the translation, it says ends in is breve in the third conjugation, ends in is breve. What does that mean? What does breve mean? I told you before, if you were paying attention. What does breve mean? No, not long. Brief, yeah, brief. That's a good translation. Brief, okay, or short. It means short. So the third conjugation ends in is breve. So the I in is is short. Okay, that's all right. I'm a typo master myself, so it's okay. I can read typos with no problem. So the second person singular ends in short is, whereas in the fourth conjugation it ends in long is. So there is a difference. Okay. The infinitive, however, like the Hazelbarth said before, ends in ire. So here's a clearer difference. We see that the vowel that identifies the fourth conjugation is the letter I. So ire is going to be seen in the infinitive form, and the I is going to be seen all through the other forms because that's the vowel that identifies this conjugation. So ire. And we have a sample verb, audio, and you can see the ending with the I in it, io. And then audis is the second person with the I in it. And then audire is the infinitive form with ire. So you can think of this simply, and I'm going to type this just so you can see it. Just give me a second. I'll type this for you here so we can talk about this. Make it very simple. So here's how we identify the four verb conjugations. We identify the four verb conjugations by the vowel that is sort of at the heart of these endings. In the first conjugation, we see that the vowel is A in are. In the second and third conjugations, we see that the vowel is E, but the difference is that the second conjugation has a short E. Third conjugation has a long, other way around. Second conjugation has a long E. Third conjugation has a short E. And then in the fourth conjugation, The vowel is I, ire, right? So that's how we identify. That's how we identify. Just real quick, you say you can't see my chat. I did type something, yeah, but I typed it to wait. Oh, I got to change it. Hold on. Thank you. Let me fix my audience here, everyone. No. Give me a second. I'm technically impaired at the moment. I'll retype it. Just a second. Don't complain. Don't complain. You're not being charged extra for this wait. Just hang with me here. Almost done. There. That better? And now you can see it. Okay? Well, don't all respond because then it'll disappear. We'll have it vanish. Okay, so you can see the first conjugation ends in are, and you see the letter A identifies that first conjugation. And then the second is ere. It's got the long E that sticks through all the forms. They've got E's in them. Then the third conjugation has a short E, so that E is in the infinitive, but then it disappears in other forms. And then in the fourth conjugation, you've got the letter I, all right? And I'm going to show you this really clearly in a minute. We've got a couple minutes left, so we're done with this rule, okay? We went through this rule. You see that this rule is pretty simple. It just tells us that there's 4 different conjugations or families of verbs, and it tells us how to identify them. Most of you can probably read that rule by yourself now and figure out its translation, okay? Not guaranteeing it, but most of you can probably read through that and word by word kind of figure out what it says. So that's good. Tells us how to identify the 4 different conjugations of verbs in Latin. Now, what I want to show you and look at a little bit is this crazy chart, okay? So we got this crazy chart, and yeah, when you first look at it, it's not very user-friendly. It's like the opposite of everything that modern schools tell teachers to do, but I think that they get this wrong. Everything you need to know about the 4 conjugations of verbs is in this one document. So if you print out this page and stick it in your binder or stick it on the bulletin board next to your desk or whatever you've got, it'll help you to translate any verb form you see. It's sort of my it's like the coolest thing I ever made. I came up with this chart like, I don't know, 15 years ago, and it's very, very helpful. So let me show you how to use it, okay? If you have this one chart, it shows you how to translate every single verb of any of the 4 conjugations. So let me show you. All right. So first of all, if you look at the chart and you look at the big picture, you'll see it's divided. You see these gray bars. It's divided into a couple sections, right? Indicative mood, subjunctive mood, imperative mood, infinitive mood. I'm not saying you know what all that means yet. Relax. Don't get nervous. You don't have a learning disability. We haven't studied that yet. Just relax, okay? So you see that the chart is divided into 4 major parts, actually 5 parts, because down on the bottom, it's got participles, all right? So there's 5 divisions of the chart. You see those big gray bars going across, okay? Now, if you look in one section, so let's just zoom in here on this first section, the indicative mood. Follow me here. Indicative mood, you've got this first section, the top of the chart here. If you look on the left side, you'll see we have the tenses: present tense, imperfect tense, future tense, perfect tense, pluperfect tense. You've got the 5 major tenses. So these are the tenses of the indicative mood, okay? Then you've got text in black, that's active voice. And then you've got text in red, that's passive voice. So you've got present active and present passive. So present, passive, indicative, all in one spot there. All right, now we've got the mood up top. We've got the tense over here. We've got the active translation and the passive translation. Now we go over here and we see the persons. We see ego, tu, ille, nos, vos, and illi. Ego means I. Tu means you, singular. Ille means he, singular. Nos means we, first person plural. Vos means you all, second person plural. Ili means they, third person plural. So you can see as we go across here, and it's hard for me to highlight this because it's so small, but as we go across here, these are all the first person singular forms. Present tense. Active if it's black, passive if it's red. All the forms for the first person singular. So amo means I love. Amor means I am loved. Doceo, I teach. Doceor, I am taught. Lego, I read. Legor, I am read. I guess a book would say that. Audio, I hear or I listen. Audior, I am heard. Okay, so you've got the forms of the verbs, and you can figure out their translation by looking over here on the left column where you get the basic translation idea. Then you just add the person and the number to the translation. So all of that information is packed in this chart. You can see here it's divided into 4 columns. Amo, amare, that's first conjugation verbs. Doceo, docere, second conjugation verbs. Lego, legere, third conjugation verbs. And audio, audire, fourth conjugation verbs. Every single thing you need to know about Latin verbs, regular Latin verbs of 4 conjugations, is on this chart. All right. You can, if once you get comfortable using this chart, any verb you find in anything you read, you can look at this chart, find the form, and figure out the translation. Okay. So it's very helpful once you learn how to use it. Now, you can say, well, what if I see a word like laudare? Like, what if I have laudas? Let me give it in the chat real quick. Let's say I have laudas, right? Well, what am I going to do about that? Well, you've got to know that laudo and laudas comes from laudare. So what conjugation is it? First, second, third, or fourth? Give me an answer. Laudas, laudare. What conjugation is it in verbs? First, good. So it's like amo, amare. So all you've got to do is go on this chart, find the first conjugation verb, and just replace am with laud. And you've got all the forms of laudare. Okay? So you would just use all the same endings with the different stems. So instead of amo, you would have laudo. Instead of amas, laudas. Amat, laudat. So once you recognize the conjugation, you can simply look at the chart, find that conjugation, and you've got all of the forms, and you can figure out the translation of those forms. All right? So it tells you everything you need to know. You just have to take some time to get used to it and figure out where the different things are. So let me give you a challenge. Ready? I'll give you a challenge. I'm going to tell you a form to find just to see if you can use this chart. And I know it's probably microscopic on your page. So this is a reward for those with good eyesight. Let's see. I would like you to give me the first person singular present indicative active form of docere. Give me the first person singular present indicative active form of docere. Just find it on the chart. Doceo, that's right. So the rest of you, don't just quit. Don't just, resolve to be, last placers. Find it on the chart before we move on here. Okay. I can't really see the chart. I know I can zoom in a little bit more, not too much. It's just, to get all this information on one page, it requires that I use my microscopic vision. So it's just how it has to be. I don't even know if it will let me zoom in much more. Yeah, there's a little bit more. I don't want to go too much. Okay. So you can see right here, it's hard to highlight. Doceo, it's first person singular. It's in the ego row. It's first person singular, it's present, and it's indicative. So we just find that spot and we have that form. Okay, I'm going to give you another one. Third person. Don't start typing because you can't figure it out yet. Third person singular. Third person singular, future indicative active for leggere. Third person singular future indicative active for leggere. Third person singular future. So Jezreel wrote legit, Jude wrote legit, Abigail wrote legit. Here's legit up here. That's present tense. Here's legit again. That's perfect tense, but we're talking about future tense here. So we're looking in here, and the third person singular form is right there, legit. So that's the third person singular future form of legere. Let me ask you this. Let's see who's still with me here. How do you translate that? How do you translate legit? Legit. How would I translate that? Take your time, think. You're going to start, smoke's going to start coming out your ears in a minute, but you just have to calm down and slow down. Listen, it's third person singular. So think what that means. Third person singular. Then think future. Then think active. He reads. Cecilia is present tense. So it can't be that. It's future. He will read. That's right. Okay. He will read. So that form right there, legit, translates as he will read. Okay. So we'll do one more, and then I'll give you a 2-week break to cool down and process all this stuff. All right. So the next form, let's see. I'll give you a hard one. Let's find the second person. Second person plural, perfect, indicative, passive form of audire. We're getting real complicated here. Second person plural, perfect, indicative, passive form of audire. Second person plural, perfect, indicative, passive of audire. You see how nerdy this stuff gets real quick. Okay, second person plural. Don't ask me questions. I'm asking you a question. You've got a chart right in front of you. Find the answer and confidently tell me the answer. None of these nervous questions. Second person, what did I say? Second person plural. So the cases are almost there. Second person plural. Gianna's just decided to give up and jump ahead and try to guess the translation. I'm still waiting for the answer here. Second person plural. Second person plural. Pluperfect indicative. Let's see. I think I saw it. I think Abigail got it. Let me find it. Where'd it go? It's lost in the chat feed forever. Auditi estis. So let's just check this. Abigail wrote auditi estis. And if we look over here, we have auditi estis. There it is. Okay. Now, what did I ask for? I asked for, all the way back in the chat, second person plural perfect. I think I might have confused you. I think I might have said pluperfect and then wrote perfect because I just wanted to make it more difficult. I typed perfect, so let's stick with perfect. So if we're sticking with perfect, Abigail's got it right. You see over here, auditi estis. That's the second person plural. It's vos. It's perfect. And it's indicative. And it's active. No, it's passive, sorry. It's passive. I said passive. And how do we know it's passive? It's red. Okay, so you can even hear me kind of stuttering and stumbling and fumbling as I talk about this, because it's hard to keep all these details in your brain all together. And that's why you just have to work slowly. But this chart helps you to see every single piece of information that you need. Okay. So it shows all of the details, all of the information You just have to work through it slowly and check and recheck, make sure you've got it right before you take a final guess. And then work on practicing translating. So this is your Easter present from me. You get this wonderful chart to play with all Easter break. You can print it out. You can carry it around with you, play with it. It's lots of fun, like a slinky. And you can work on learning all the Latin verb forms. All right. Yeah, you. That's right, Cecilia. Blessed art thou. You've got this verb chart to play with all Easter break. All right. So anyway, it is very helpful. We're going to study every single form in detail in Latin grammar. So, this is going to just get easier and easier over time. But in all seriousness, you can start to use this and think of the conjugations, find the forms, think of the translations. You can go from English to Latin like this. You could take an English idea and then figure out like, well, how would I say that in Latin? And find the form that would express that idea. Or you can go from Latin to English and take any form. Now, what's crazy, real quick, I know I'm running late and you're going to all, send me a bill or something like that. But if we look at this, let me just give you an example on Latin words here. If we look up a form, notice that this Latin words thing, it'll tell us all this information. It'll give us this, Latin nerd speak language stuff here. It'll tell us all this information. So yeah, can you find this really quickly? I know it's time. You can find all this information easily by looking it up, but the chart that I give you, as archaic, as Flintstonian as it is, it actually helps you to see it all. And this is what's actually most helpful. You can actually learn that chart, and what will happen, this is the last thing I'm going to say, so pay attention. Last thing, I promise. Last point. If you study the chart, you'll start to get familiar with where stuff is on the chart. And then when you see other words in the future, even if you can't think of the exact translation, you'll have in your mind, you'll be able to picture where it is on the chart, and you can make a good guess. So you'll just start to get used to the places on the chart and what they mean. And that image will kind of burn into your brain for the rest of your life, and you'll never forget it. So that's all for this lesson on Latin verb forms. I'll put a link. There probably is a link. I'm not gonna talk about it now. I promise that was my last point. I'll put a link on the student forum on the Latin grammar page. Again, you can just Google it, or I think any search engine would work. So if you like DuckDuckGo, if you're like a Google protester and you use DuckDuckGo or something like that, you can probably find it there. But you can just look for Latin conjugation verb chart, and it'll probably show my chart. So anyway, that's everything I want to share today. If you don't have any questions, you're free to go. Have a happy Easter holiday. Next week is Holy Week. Then after that, we've got Easter break for Easter week. And then we come back, I think, April 17th. So have a happy holiday. Enjoy the break. Get away from your computer. Go outside and breathe some oxygen. Get some wind in your face and some sun on your body. Healthy, get healthy. Get some exercise. Help your parents. Do some work. Clean up your room. All that fun stuff. Make good use of your Easter break. I'll be available. If you have any questions over break, you can email me anytime, but we won't have any live classes until we get back. So second week of April. All right. Have a happy Easter. I'll talk to you all later. God bless everybody.